Get your things and get out. You're done here. Daniel smirked, sliding the pink slip across the glass table. I looked at the paper, then at him and smiled. He thought he was saving a salary. He didn't know he just padlocked the gates of the country's busiest ports. In his mind, I was just an overpaid administrator holding up his shipping velocity. He didn't know that my personal credentials, registered under my individual customs broker license, were the only virtual key keeping U.S. Customs from seizing every incoming freight container we had on the water. I signed the paper, stood up, and walked out into the crisp morning air. To understand how a 51-year-old customs compliance director ended up smiling at his own termination, you have to look at the gears that keep global trade moving. For 15 years, I was the man who made sure Vanguard Global Logistics stayed out of federal crosshairs. Vanguard is a third-party logistics giant, pulling in $450 million in annual revenue. We move everything from lithium batteries to consumer electronics across the Pacific, funneling them through the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Newark. It is a massive, high-stakes operation where a single missing paper can hold up $10 million worth of inventory on a dock. I started at Vanguard in 2011, back when the company was run by Lawrence Vance. Lawrence was a logistics man of the old school. He knew that the margins in transportation were razor-thin, but he also knew that a clean record with U.S. Customs and Border Protection was worth more than gold. Lawrence hired me because I held an individual customs broker license. Earning that license is no joke. The federal customs broker exam is a grueling 5-hour test with a pass rate that rarely climbs above 15%. It requires a deep, exhaustive knowledge of the harmonized tariff schedule, federal regulations, and international trade laws. When Lawrence brought me on, he didn't just hire an employee. He integrated my license into the very architecture of Vanguard shipping systems. Under federal law, specifically Title 19 of the United States Code, Section 1641, a corporation cannot conduct customs business unless it has at least one licensed customs broker who actively supervises and controls its operations. Vanguard did not want to pay the massive overhead of hiring a full-time brokerage house, so they structured their entire import-export framework around my individual license. Every customs entry summary, every hazardous material manifest, and every duty payment filed through Vanguard's automated systems went out under my license number. I spent 15 years building a compliance department that was airtight. I arrived at the office every morning at 6, long before the sun hit the glass towers of downtown. My desk was always piled with customs entry audits, country of origin certificates, and shipping manifests. I worked closely with Clara Finch, our senior logistics analyst. Clara is 46, a detail-oriented expert who knows our carrier allocations inside and out. Together, we built an automated interface that linked our enterprise resource planning software directly with the Customs and Border Protection portal. This system used an API token linked directly to my individual broker license. Without that token, the automated filings would fail, reverting the company to manual paper submissions that take days, sometimes weeks, to clear. But the real crown jewel of our compliance was our CPAT status. The Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism is a voluntary supply chain security program. Because Vanguard was certified, our containers were categorized as low risk. Instead of being pulled aside for intensive physical examinations at the ports, our shipments sailed through customs clearance in hours. In the shipping business, time is money. A CPAT certification is the difference between a container arriving at a Walmart distribution center in 2 days or sitting on a concrete dock for 2 weeks while customs agents rip open boxes of consumer electronics. I was the registered point of contact and designated security officer for Vanguard's CPAT profile. My personal credentials and security clearance were the only ones tied to the government portal. Everything ran like clockwork until Lawrence Vance retired. 6 months ago, Lawrence decided he wanted to spend his remaining years on a ranch in Montana. He stepped down as CEO and handed the operations of Vanguard to his son-in-law, Daniel Vance. Daniel is 34, a former hedge fund analyst who had never seen the inside of a shipping container. He married Lawrence's daughter Olivia, and through nepotism, ascended to the role of chief operating officer with the promise of taking over as CEO within a year. Daniel didn't care about federal regulations, shipping safety, or compliance. He cared about two things: cutting costs to boost his quarterly EBITDA and accelerating shipping speeds to impress the board of directors. From his first week, Daniel looked at my department as a cost center. He saw the $300,000 we spent annually on compliance audits as wasted money. He hated that I refused to clear containers that lacked proper country of origin documentation or had mismatched commercial invoices. To Daniel, compliance was just a set of arbitrary rules that slowed down his shipping velocity. He wanted to push volume, double our daily container throughput, and squeeze every cent out of our operations. He didn't understand that the only reason Vanguard could move 400 containers a week was because my team spent hours auditing every single manifest before the ships even left the ports in Shenzhen and Busan. "Julian, you're living in the past," Daniel told me during our first budget meeting. He was sitting at the head of the conference table, playing with an expensive pen. "We are losing thousands of dollars every time you hold up a shipment for a minor invoice discrepancy. We need to clear these boxes first and worry about the paperwork later. Speed is the only metric that matters." "Compliance isn't a speed bump, Daniel," I replied calmly. "It's the only thing keeping U.S. Customs from seizing our cargo. If we file an incorrect entry summary, we face penalties that can easily wipe out the profit margin of the entire shipment. If we lose our CPAT status, our cargo will sit at the Port of Los Angeles for weeks. We can't afford to take shortcuts." Daniel just smiled, a condescending smirk that made my blood run cold. "We'll see about that, Julian. The industry is changing, and we need people who are focused on growth, not rules." That was the moment I realized Daniel wasn't just incompetent. He was a liability. And I knew that when he finally decided to cross the line, I had to be ready to protect myself. The conflict did not take long to surface. It happened on a rainy Tuesday morning in early April. I was in my office auditing the weekly shipping manifests from East Asia when Clara Finch walked in, closing the door behind her. Her face was pale, and she held a printout of an incoming manifest from Ningbo, China. "Julian, you need to look at this," Clara said, laying the sheet on my desk. Daniel just pushed through 15 40-foot containers on the vessel Horizon Star. They are currently 12 hours away from the Port of Los Angeles. The manifest lists the cargo as molded plastic toys with a declared value of $80,000. But look at the weight and the shipper details. I scanned the document. The weight of the containers was far too high for plastic toys. More importantly, the shipper was a known manufacturer of industrial lithium-ion batteries and high-power electric motors. Under current trade regulations, industrial batteries are subject to strict hazardous materials manifests, special shipping permits, and a 25% Section 301 tariff. By declaring them as plastic toys, Vanguard was avoiding the hazmat permits and evading over $120,000 in import duties. This wasn't just a compliance error. It was federal smuggling and tariff evasion under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 542, which carries heavy prison sentences and millions of dollars in corporate fines. "Did Daniel approve this?" I asked, looking up at Clara. "Directly," she replied. "He bypassed our compliance queue. He used his executive overrides to submit the manifest directly to the port terminal operator. But because Vanguard operates under our corporate importer ID, the final customs entry summary still needs to be filed through our automated portal under your broker license number." "I am not signing off on this," I said. "If I file this entry summary knowing the cargo is misdeclared, I am personally liable. The government can revoke my customs broker license, and I could face criminal charges. I'll talk to Daniel." I took the printout and walked down the hall to the executive suite. Daniel was in his office, looking at a spreadsheet on his large monitor. He looked up as I entered, his expression turning cold. "Daniel, we have a problem," I said, placing the manifest on his desk. "These 15 containers on the Horizon Star are misdeclared. They are listed as plastic toys, but the cargo weight and shipper profile indicate they contain lithium-ion batteries. We cannot file the customs entry under this classification. It is a direct violation of federal law." Daniel leaned back in his leather chair, crossing his arms. "I approved those shipments, Julian. The client is a new partner of ours, and we promised them expedited clearance. We don't have time to wait for hazmat permits. File the paperwork as it is. I can't do that, I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. Filing false customs declarations is a felony. As the licensed broker of record, my name and credentials are on that filing. If U.S. Customs conducts a random physical inspection at the port, which they frequently do for shipments from that specific Ningbo port, they will seize the cargo, fine Vanguard, and prosecute me. The containers need to be held at the terminal for a cargo amendment and proper declaration. Daniel stood up, leaning over his desk, his eyes narrowing. Listen to me, Julian. Vanguard is my company now. Lawrence is gone. I am running the show, and I say those shipments clear today. You are an employee. Your job is to make our operations run smoothly, not to act as a federal agent. File the entry summary now. My license is my personal property, Daniel, I replied. I spent years earning it, and I will not risk it to save you a few $1,000s in duty fees. I will not file these entries until we receive the correct commercial invoices and hazmat permits from the shipper. Daniel's face flushed red. He slammed his hand on the desk. You think you're indispensable, don't you? You think because you've been here for 15 years you can dictate terms to me? You are a dinosaur, Julian. You're holding this company back with your outdated rules. He reached for his phone and dialed HR. Brenda, come to my office right now and bring a termination notice. 5 minutes later, Brenda Thorne, the HR director, walked in. She looked uncomfortable, refusing to meet my eyes. Daniel took a pre-printed termination letter from her folder and slid it across the glass table. You're fired, Julian, Daniel said, his voice dripping with arrogance. Effective immediately. For insubordination and sabotaging company operations, we are terminating your contract today. I looked at the document. It was a standard termination notice, but attached to it was a separation agreement. The agreement offered me 2 weeks of severance pay, a pathetic amount for 15 years of service, on the condition that I signed a full liability waiver and agreed to leave my customs database, access and credentials active for a 90-day transition period. Daniel smirked. Sign the waiver, and we'll give you the 2 weeks. Leave your system logins on Brenda's desk. We'll have one of the junior analysts manage the entry portal. It's just data entry, anyway. He truly had no idea. He thought the customs portal was just a website where you typed in numbers, like ordering office supplies. He didn't understand that the API token linking Vanguard software to the federal government was legally tied to my individual license, and that by law, a corporate importer ID cannot file automated entries without a licensed broker actively supervising the account. I picked up my pen. I crossed out the separation agreement and the liability waiver. I signed only the basic termination acknowledgement, confirming that I had received the notice of firing. I stood up, buttoned my navy suit jacket, and looked Daniel dead in the eye. Understood, I said quietly. That's it? Daniel laughed. No argument? I thought you'd fight for your job. There's nothing to fight for, Daniel, I said. You've made your decision. I will pack my personal belongings and leave. I walked back to my office. Clara was waiting there, her eyes wide with concern. I gave her a small nod. He fired me, Clara. He wants to run the system without me. He's insane, Clara whispered. What are you going to do? I'm going to pack my desk, I said, pulling a cardboard box from the closet. And then I'm going to follow the law. I packed my personal belongings, a few framed photos, a silver clock Lawrence had given me for my 10-year anniversary, and my copy of the Code of Federal Regulations into a single cardboard box. By noon, I was driving home, the box sitting on the passenger seat of my car. I felt a strange sense of calm. For 15 years, I had carried the weight of Vanguard's compliance on my shoulders, constantly worrying about the mistakes of others. Now, that weight was gone. As soon as I reached my house, I went straight to my home office. I had a dedicated computer terminal connected to the government database, a secure setup that allowed me to monitor shipments after hours. I sat down, booted up the system, and logged into the Automated Commercial Environment Portal, known in the logistics industry as ACE. ACE is the primary platform through which U.S. Customs and Border Protection manages all import and export transactions. My actions next were not motivated by malice, nor were they an act of hacking. They were a strict, literal execution of federal law. Under Title 19 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 111.28, A licensed customs broker is legally obligated to exercise responsible supervision and control over all customs transactions conducted under their name. If a broker is terminated or resigns from a corporation, they must immediately notify the port director of the dissociation. If they fail to do so, they remain legally liable for every shipment filed by that corporation. I pulled up the corporate profile for Vanguard Global Logistics. I went to the License Management tab, where my individual customs broker license was linked to Vanguard's Federal Importer Identification Number. With a few clicks, I opened the dissociation form. I filled in the date of my termination, uploaded a scanned copy of my termination notice signed by Daniel, and clicked Submit. Instantly, the CBP system updated. The linkage between my license and Vanguard's importer ID was severed. Next, I opened the security configuration for the API token. For years, Vanguard had used an automated software system to transmit container manifests and entry summaries directly to the ACE portal. This system operated via a digital certificate and an API token that were registered to my individual broker license. Under federal rules, I could not allow an unlicensed entity to use my digital signature. I clicked on the API management screen and clicked the button labeled Revoke Certificate. The screen flashed and a message appeared. API token revoked. Automated transmissions disabled from that moment on. Vanguard's shipping software could no longer communicate with the United States government. Any attempt by Vanguard to file an entry summary electronically would result in an immediate system error. They were effectively locked out of the automated clearing system. But I wasn't finished. I logged into the CTPAT portal. CTPAT, the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism, is what allowed Vanguard shipments to bypass the long, intensive physical inspections at the ports. Because Vanguard's was certified, their containers were routed through the green lane, clearing customs within hours of arrival. But the CTPAT certification requires a registered security officer who holds a valid customs broker license to oversee compliance. I opened Vanguard's CTPAT profile. I removed my name, my personal email address, and my broker license number from the registration fields, because I was the sole qualifying compliance officer. On the account, the system did not allow the profile to remain active without a replacement. The portal displayed a red warning message: no certified compliance officer on file. Account status: suspended. A suspension of CTPAT status is a catastrophic event for a logistics provider. It means the company is immediately stripped of its low-risk status. Every container shipped under Vanguard's importer ID would now be flagged by the CBP system for manual verification. Instead of sliding through the ports, their cargo would be subjected to physical examinations, customs audits, and terminal holds. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. It was 2:30 p.m. on Tuesday. To ensure everything was documented, I drafted a formal email to Lawrence Vance using his personal email address. I explained that I had been terminated by Daniel and that in accordance with federal regulations under 19 CFR, paragraph 111128, I had dissociated my license from Vanguard Global Logistics and revoked the system's access tokens. I attached a copy of the CBP confirmation receipt. I did not send the email to Daniel. He would find out soon enough. By Wednesday morning, the first container ships were beginning to arrive at the port of Los Angeles. Among them was the Horizon Star, carrying Daniel's 15 unverified containers of lithium-ion batteries misdeclared as plastic toys. Normally, Vanguard's automated system would have submitted the entry summary 72 hours before the ship docked, and the containers would have been cleared for pickup by the time the vessel finished unloading. But this time, Vanguard's automated submissions failed. When the junior logistics clerk at Vanguard tried to upload the files, the software returned a fatal error. Invalid broker credentials. Transmission denied. Without the automated system, Vanguard could not clear the cargo. The containers were unloaded from the ship and placed in the port terminal storage area. Under port rules, a shipping company has a short window of free time, usually 5 days, to clear their containers and move them out of the port. Once that free time is, the port charges a daily storage fee known as demurrage. For a single container, demurrage can range from $200 to $500 a day, and it escalates the longer the container sits. But Vanguard didn't have just one container. They had dozens arriving every single day, and they were about to find out what happens when the gate is locked. By Thursday morning, the cracks in Vanguard Global Logistics began to tear the company apart. In the logistics business, an office is only as quiet as its telephones, and that morning, the phones at Vanguard's headquarters were ringing off the hook. Brad Fletcher, the friend Daniel had hired to replace me, was in a state of absolute panic. He had spent his first 2 days in the office enjoying his new title, but when he tried to clear the daily shipments, he realized the automated system was completely dead. The junior clerks were staring at screens displaying a red warning error. Broker ID not found. Without my license active in the ACE portal, Vanguard could not submit a single customs entry. Brad tried to print out manual paper forms and drive them to the customs house at the Port of Los Angeles. But when he arrived, the customs officers looked at the paperwork, saw the company's importer ID, and refused to accept them. Under federal law, manual customs filings still require the physical signature and license number of a designated broker who is actively associated with the importer. Vanguard had no such broker on record. Meanwhile, the situation at the port was descending into chaos. The Horizon Star had finished unloading. Daniel's 15 containers of lithium-ion batteries were sitting on the dock, their free time rapidly ticking away. Because Vanguard's CPAT status was suspended, the CBP's automated targeting system flagged the shipment. The lack of a registered compliance officer, combined with the sudden suspension of the corporate security profile, triggered a mandatory physical inspection. CBP officers, accompanied by hazardous materials inspectors, moved the 15 containers to a centralized examination station. They broke the plastic seals and opened the heavy steel doors. Instead of the declared plastic toys, they found pallets of high-capacity industrial lithium-ion batteries and heavy electric motors packed without the required hazmat labeling or temperature control warnings. The reaction from the federal government was swift and severe. The port director immediately issued a formal seizure notice for the cargo and initiated a criminal investigation into Vanguard for smuggling and tariff fraud under Title 18, Section 545. But the disaster didn't stop with the Ningbo containers. Vanguard had dozens of other containers arriving daily for our largest retail clients, including Walmart and Target. These were legitimate shipments, but because Vanguard's customs privileges were suspended, they were all swept up in the chaos. Over 80 containers in Los Angeles and 40 in Newark were placed under administrative hold. Demurrage fees began to accumulate. The port terminals charged Vanguard a daily storage rate that escalated rapidly. By Friday morning, Vanguard had 120 containers stuck on the docks, incurring an average of $2,500 per container per day in demurrage and port fees. That was $300,000 a day in storage costs alone. Worse, the retail giants had strict service-level agreements in their contracts. For every day a container of consumer goods was delayed past its delivery window, Vanguard faced a penalty of $5,000. With 120 delayed containers, the SLA penalties amounted to $600,000 a day. In total, Vanguard was losing nearly $900,000 every 24 hours. My phone began to ring on Friday morning while I was in my garden pruning the rose bushes. I looked down at the screen. Daniel Vance. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again, and then again. By noon, I had 14 missed calls and 3 urgent text messages from Daniel. Julian, we have a technical glitch with the ACE portal. Call me immediately. Julian, this is urgent. We need you to log in and fix the API token. Julian, call me now. This is a directive from the executive office. I ignored them all. I walked inside, made myself a fresh cup of coffee, and sat down at my computer. I checked my email. There was an email from Daniel, copied to Brenda Thorne in HR. The tone was vastly different from the one he had used when he fired me. Julian, the email read, we believe there was a misunderstanding during our meeting on Tuesday. Vanguard values your long service, and we would like to offer you your position back as compliance director, effective immediately. We will increase your annual salary by 20% to $216,000. Please reactivate your broker credentials on the ACE portal today so we can clear the outstanding shipments, and we can discuss the contract details on Monday. I smiled. Daniel was terrified. He had finally realized that he didn't just fire an employee. He had unplugged the life support system of his $450 million company. I hit reply. I kept my tone strictly professional, cold, and legally precise. Daniel, I wrote, my individual customs broker license is my personal property, and I have dissociated it from Vanguard Global Logistics in accordance with federal law under 19 CFR 111-28. I am no longer an employee of Vanguard, and I will not reactivate my credentials or link my license to your importer ID. My license is not for lease. However, if Vanguard requires my assistance to manage a transition to a new licensed broker of record, I am willing to provide consulting services under the following terms. 1. Vanguard must pay a flat consulting fee of $150,000, payable immediately via wire transfer. Point 2. Vanguard must immediately pay my outstanding compliance bonus of $45,000 from the previous fiscal year. 3. The board of directors must sign a full, unconditional release of liability, indemnifying me from any actions, shipments, or customs filings made by Vanguard, specifically including the Ningbo shipments on the vessel Horizon Star. Point 4. You must be removed from your position as Chief Operating Officer and Head of Compliance, and a qualified compliance officer must be appointed to oversee operations. Once these terms are met and the funds are cleared, I will assist a new licensed broker in establishing their own credentials on the port portal. I will not clear the Ningbo shipments. I clicked send. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. This time, the caller ID did not say Daniel Vance. It said Lawrence Vance. The founder of the company was calling me from Montana. I picked up the phone. Hello, Lawrence. Julian. Lawrence's voice sounded tired, old, and deeply concerned. I just received a notification from U.S. Customs that Vanguard is under federal investigation for smuggling, and I have an email from you stating you've been fired. What on earth is going on? I spent the next hour on the phone with Lawrence, detailing everything. I explained the Ningbo shipments, the misdeclared cargo weight, the lithium-ion batteries, and Daniel's attempt to force me to file fraudulent entries under my license. I told him about the CTPAT suspension and the daily losses of nearly $1 million that were currently draining Vanguard's accounts. Lawrence was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was trembling with anger. Julian, I built this company on honesty. I trusted Daniel to protect my family's legacy. He has ruined it in 6 months. I am boarding a flight to Los Angeles in an hour. Please, do not do anything else until I arrive. By Saturday morning, Lawrence had landed. He did not go to his home. He went straight to the Vanguard headquarters. He called an emergency meeting of the board of directors. Clara Finch was brought in to present the shipment data and the audit records that Daniel had tried to bypass. The evidence was undeniable. Daniel had not only risked the company's operating license, but he had actively committed federal customs fraud to line his own pockets through a kickback scheme with his cousin's warehouse. The board acted immediately. They voted unanimously to strip Daniel of his title as Chief Operating Officer and terminate his employment with cause, effective immediately. There would be no severance, no bonuses, and no quiet exit for Daniel. Furthermore, the board instructed the company's legal counsel to cooperate fully with the Customs and Border Protection investigation. They handed over all internal emails, manifests, and system logs, pointing the finger directly at Daniel as the sole instigator of the fraudulent Ningbo filings. Daniel was now facing federal indictment under 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 545 for smuggling goods into the United States, a charge that carries a maximum penalty of 20 years in federal prison and hundreds of thousands of dollars in individual fines. On Saturday evening, I received a PDF scan of a signed board resolution. The board of directors had approved all 4 of my consulting terms. They had signed the full release of liability, completely immunizing me from any legal fallout regarding the Ningbo containers or any other filings made during Daniel's tenure. By Monday morning at 9, my bank account showed 2 wire transfers, one for $45,000, representing my unpaid compliance bonus, the other for $150,000, my flat consulting fee. My 15 years of dedication had finally been compensated on my terms. I returned to the Vanguard offices on Monday afternoon not as an employee, but as an independent contractor. The atmosphere in the building was sober. The arrogance that Daniel had brought with him had evaporated. I sat down with Lawrence and Clara Finch in the executive conference room. Lawrence looked older, but there was a fierce determination in his eyes. He wanted to save the company, and he knew he had to do it the right way. "Julian, I want you to come back," Lawrence said. "Name your price. I'll make you vice president of compliance. We need you." "I appreciate the offer, Lawrence," I replied, shaking my head. "But I've spent 15 years working 60-hour weeks. I enjoyed my weekend of freedom, and I think it's time for me to move on to the next chapter. But I won't leave you in the dark." I turned to Clara. Clara has been working with me for 10 years. She knows the compliance protocols inside out. And more importantly, she took the customs broker exam last October and received her license confirmation last month. She is fully licensed and ready. Clara looked surprised, then smiled. She had kept her exam results quiet, unsure of her future under Daniel's regime. Now, she was the key to Vanguard's survival. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with Clara to transition the compliance systems. Under my guidance, Clara logged into the ACE portal and linked her new broker license to Vanguard's importer ID. We generated a new API token and re-established the connection with the Federal Customs database. We also submitted a comprehensive corrective action plan to the CPAT board. We demonstrated that Daniel Vance had been terminated, that the company was cooperating with the federal investigation, and that Clara, a licensed broker, was now the official security officer. Within 10 days, Vanguard's CPAT status was reinstated from suspended to active. The stuck containers were slowly cleared. The 80 containers in Los Angeles and 40 in Newark were finally processed under Clara's license. Vanguard had to pay nearly $3 million in demurrage fees and contract SLA penalties, a massive blow to their quarterly profits, but the company survived. The 15 containers of lithium-ion batteries were officially seized by the government, and Vanguard paid a substantial administrative fine, but they avoided a total operational shutdown. My job was complete. On my final day, I shook hands with Lawrence and gave Clara a hug. I walked out of the building with my consulting fee in my bank account and my professional reputation completely intact. Now I spend my mornings on my patio, enjoying the California sun and drinking coffee. Sometimes I check the federal court listings. Daniel's trial is set for next spring, and his lawyers are desperately trying to negotiate a plea deal to avoid prison time. His wife Olivia has filed for divorce, and the family has completely cut him off. In the world of logistics, people often think the trucks, the ships, and the cranes are the things that hold the power. But they are wrong. The real power is the invisible web of rules, laws, and credentials that keep those wheels turning. And if you don't respect the compliance, the whole system will bring you down.